Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Brands versus Aggregators. And I have a special guest today. We're changing things up a little bit. I want to introduce you guys to Elizabeth Greene, who is a co-founder at Junglr. I almost said Junglr. That would be impressive if we could add that to the show. Elizabeth Greene is co-founder at Junglr. And so Elizabeth, I would love it if we could talk a little bit about what you do and the importance of that in the world of e-commerce.
Yeah, definitely. First, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me on. So what we do is we help brands run advertising on platform. So if it touches Amazon advertising, we can definitely help out with that. And as far as importance, definitely becoming more and more important. As things go on, Amazon has definitely realized that first off, it is in their best interests to build out their ad platform a lot for their bottom line, as well as other reasons. And then also, as it gets more competitive, Amazon has also recognized that. So they're trying to build out more options, more placements to kind of spread it out a little bit. So the world of Amazon advertising, even a couple of years ago, we said it's fast growing. It seems like every year we say it's still going.
Yeah.
There's still more things.
It's one of those things where you're like, our previous description was not enough, but it wasn't developed enough for us to not know, or for us to know that it was not a good description.
Yeah, definitely. I had a call with someone this morning and we were talking about it. And I was saying, like, even like 2 years ago, people were like, yeah, I probably should figure out this ad thing. It's probably something I should look into. And now people are like, okay, I need to know how to run these. Even if they're like a smaller brand coming on the platform, it's becoming a must do at this point. So there's a lot to get into for sure.
Definitely. So I want to ask sort of an interesting question to me. This normally on this podcast, they talk a lot about, how aggregators are approaching the business and how that affects brands. And so I'm curious, in terms of Amazon advertising, how do brands compete with aggregators who have more of a budget for advertising and stuff like that? Or can they coexist peacefully? Or how should that be approached, do you think, by brands?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to Amazon advertising, like coexisting, I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of demand for different products. There's a lot of demand for variations of, different things. Some people like blue, some people like red. Like, you're always going to have those spaces where you can fit into the market. Competition does get fierce, regardless if it's an aggregator or another brand when it comes to advertising, because it is an auction. So you are like bidding on specific things. And if someone says like, hey, I'm willing to pay double, the price just went double. So there always is going to be that factor to it, again, regardless of who it is that you're pitting against. I definitely think that there is room in the market to compete. What we're finding more and more is that the people who are keeping up with the platform are the people who really know their numbers. So the things that it depends on which aggregator you talk to, but they do realize the importance of data and the importance of looking at things holistically. And they may, in some instances, be more willing to take a loss if they see a potential upside, and being able to read the numbers and determine, like, is there an upside? Is there not an upside? The good news is that that's entirely possible, no matter how small or big you are. So if you are willing to, get that learning curve in, I think there's definitely ways that you can compete.
That's amazing. And what do you think, what are the most important things for brands to know when they're looking at Amazon advertising and PPC and DSP and all the acronyms? How do they approach that? What do you think is a good first step, and what's the most important thing for them to take away maybe from this conversation?
So for me, I've been putting out some content and talking a lot more about like 3 particular numbers that you can track, that don't necessarily give you what to do. They kind of give you a more like guiding compass. Where am I going? How is this working type information. Everyone should know about ACoS, advertising cost of sale, ad spend divided by ad sales. Historically, this has kind of been like everyone's guidepost and everyone's guiding light, because historically it had been really low. It wasn't too hard to get good numbers. If you're paying 10 cents and you're selling a click and you're selling something for like $35, like that difference is, I mean, like you're just gonna get good numbers. Let's be honest, even if your conversion rate's pretty crappy. Nowadays, when you're paying $2 for the click, $1 for the click, like those numbers can change.
Right.
So what we're finding now is that people who are only looking at advertising in isolation can end up missing out on some of the other kind of outside benefits. So the one thing with Amazon advertising is it can influence organic ranking. That's still a factor. Amazon hasn't taken that away. So if you're able to kind of correlate what you're doing with the ads and say, okay, I'm taking a loss on the ads, but overall my account, my sales is growing, then maybe I'm okay with getting a little bit less margins on like this small piece. So I don't think that we should throw out ACoS, but I don't think it should be our guidepost anymore. There's another number people talk about. You'll hear total ACoS. I've heard true ACoS, tacos. It's a great acronym. It's awesome.
I'm a big fan of tacos.
Yes, I love tacos. That is your ad spend divided by your total sales in your accounts. It's basically, it's like, all right, so out of all the revenue I'm generating across everything, like what piece of that did I have to spend on my ads, to kind of get here. So that's like, again, it's a holistic way to look at things, which is awesome. It kind of gives you an idea of your total margin. So if you know, like your total average margins on your account is, like say you're doing great and you have like 30%, and then your total ACoS is like 10%, you're like, great, I still got 20% margins to play with. And, it kind of gives you, again, these are more like guideposts, compasses, like, hey, how am I doing? The other number that is being talked about more in savvy circles, not as like in the limelight as tacos has been, is what I call ad sale percentage. You've heard of like ratio of ads to organic. So it lets you know how reliant your account is on the ads. And this can actually be very, very helpful. So one thing I found is that people who don't really know their numbers, and maybe they go, oh, okay, I need to calculate my total ACoS. So they're looking at their numbers and they're tracking them and they're going, oh my gosh, my ACoS and my total ACoS are rising month over month. Like, this is not good. I need to pull back on my ads. Cool. And then they pull back on their ads and all of a sudden their total sales drops. That's definitely a factor. I mean, it can happen. So one thing you can calculate to kind of at least know the impact of this, like pulling back on ads, is the ratio of, again, like your ad sale percentage. So how much of my total sales in my account are being attributed through the ads. So what you would do is just take your ads sales and then divide it by your total sales. That again gives you a percentage. Historically, we said like you never want to get above 30%. The problem is that there's another factor in this, and it's not just that it's getting more and more competitive out there, and that's definitely a factor. The other factor is that, again, there's more placements. So if you looked historically on page 1, you would see the headline ad, like that's always been there, but like you would probably see like 2 placements, maybe 3 at the top that were ads, and then you would just see a whole bunch of organic spots. So historically, if you were in spot like 8, you were pretty high up the page. Like 10 was pretty high up the page, so you still got good visibility. Now that's like less so. Now spot 10 is like getting near, mid bottom. So that just makes you more reliant on ads. So if you might have decent placement, but you're like, hey, for me to get any visibility, I just need to run ads. So that's just naturally going to make you more reliant on ads to get sales. And it's just kind of a factor in the name of the game. But again, so it's not, like if you're moving towards like 70% of your total sales coming from the ads, which you expect on a launch. So we expect that, but at least we can see, all right, so as I push ads, as I gain more organic traction, am I seeing this number slowly swing towards more of more organic placements, which is kind of where you want to be. So if,
how long does that usually take? Like from launch to what point do you think is a good amount of time for it to take to shift it from heavily reliant on ad sales to very comfortably organic with support?
Honestly, it depends on the product. You hear a lot of people like those scenarios, like it depends, but honestly, it does. And it depends more on your product and the market you're getting into, how differentiated you are, and how much the market wants your differentiation. So for instance, if you're dropping in with a product that is slightly different than the market, like maybe you have a new color, or maybe you have like a slight differentiation on style. If the market loves it and they're like, that's what we've been asking for, then you're probably going to see that lift, within a month or so, maybe you can like immediately see that swing. So it really depends on how quickly you can rank organically. Organic ranking, typically speaking, is driven by like really good signals to Amazon, which is like great click-through rates, great conversion rates, great add to carts, all the signals that tell Amazon like, hey, I love this product, we want to purchase it. Then Amazon's like, great, cool, let's show that, because we want the sales, we want our cut of it. And so that, then you kind of get that traction. Where I find it can be hard to break into is markets that first off are just really, really competitive. There's a lot of people vying for the same spots. And if you come in with a product that's like, it's a little better quality, sometimes good quality can be hard to demonstrate to the market. So if there's a way to demonstrate it on a listing, like do it. I talk to sellers all the time and they're like, oh, we looked at reviews and we've, identified that everyone hates it. The fabric's always fraying. It's terrible. So we have a thicker fabric, we have double stitch. And I'm like, that's amazing. Your product sounds awesome. I'm looking at your listing and I don't see that. Like they're not going to know until they purchase that your product's better. So you better tell them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such good advice. So that's something you would definitely have like in the listing so that people can look for this when they're
if you have a point of differentiation, you need to tell the shopper. Because they're not going to know.
Very good advice. Very good advice. What I didn't expect anything less, of course, from you guys, Elizabeth. So I wanted to ask another question that's sort of more geared toward the aggregators and brands. Typical questions for this podcast. So in the news right now, aggregators are suspending acquisitions. Thrasio is now doing layoffs. Olsum actually acquired a US aggregator, and Factory 14 has been acquired as well. So what are your thoughts in this? Because as we all know, like this, the ever-changing landscape of aggregators and brokers and buyers and sellers and brands, it has a massive impact on the way everyone else does business and the cost of advertising and so many other things. So what are your thoughts on this? And what do you think the next step is for brands and the next step is for aggregators?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, next step remains to be seen. I think, so the issue, I mean, the thing that the aggregators are facing is, I mean, Amazon was definitely ripe for the picking before, because there was a lot of brands that, just weren't getting real, like if you went and bought a business doing very similar numbers, very similar margins, but it wasn't directly focused on Amazon, there is a risk factor to that. Because of course, if Amazon shuts you down, like your entire business is, it's non-existent until you can get that fixed. So, I mean, it's definitely had a major risk factor for those brands that were specifically focused on Amazon. That being said, a lot of the profits and what these brands were generating, typical market value for purchasing, just a regular other business outside of it, the valuations were very low previously. So there was a lot of people who recognized that. And so, I mean, I think the good thing that has come from aggregators is there's definitely been this spotlight shown on Amazon brands. So you saw like valuations absolutely skyrocket, and then brands being able to actually build something. And then, so, I mean, it's a two sides of the coin. I mean, as far as building heavily reliant on Amazon. One is, again, like you're reliant. So, there is that risk factor, but the other flip side is that Amazon is leveraging. So I know people talk about FBA cost rising and there's whole issues with that. However, it does mean that like your count, I mean, as far as how many people you have to have on your team to run these enormous businesses. I mean, you're leveraging the power of what Amazon has built. I mean, so it does cut both ways. As far as, yeah, what they're doing now, I mean, they took a lot there. I mean, there's a lot of funding in there, and that funding has to show a return. And so they've been kind of squeezed. And I think anyone who's running a brand themselves is finding like it's not easy. There's a lot of moving parts. You can do it as, with a very limited team. However, that limited team has to span a whole lot of different like industry, you got to do the marketing and you got to do the sourcing and you have to do logistics. And it's like one person has to have a plethora of talents to be able to do it very, very well. Because as the market gets more competitive, it's the people who know their numbers and know how to navigate situations. So consequently, I mean, talent is very well valued in the Amazon space. So again, there's good things that are coming out of it for brands, I think, in that, valuations and value on talent and being able to turn that over into maybe different industries. But yeah, for them to have to, again, with like shipping costs and logistics being squeezed and all kinds of other things, it's been difficult for them to, show the returns that they maybe could in previous years, especially with the huge expansion that we got, with like all the lockdowns and stuff and people being forced to do online. Like that created a huge wave that of course benefited a lot of online sellers. But now as that wave has kind of started to dissipate, we're kind of getting back to normal numbers. And then with margins kind of decreasing in tandem with that, it's been rough, let's be honest.
Right. Amazon fees are increasing, inflation, all the things that come with life and the world marching forward, I think it makes it tough on brands and aggregators both. And now I think aggregators are maybe feeling the pressure of, all of that money that they have accepted. And now, as you said, it's time for them to show their cards, put them all out on the table and show what that money did. So what do you think the goal, if we're just playing pure speculation here, what do you think the goal for a company like Thrasio in doing their layoffs? What do you think their strategy and their goal and their end game is there? Because I think some people will see that and they'll say, oh, they must be in trouble. I think some people will see that and say, they're being smart, they're pivoting when they need to. And so what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to be honest, so I'm not as close to that world. So my insights are going to be less than some. I've seen some really good speculations on LinkedIn and other places of people, much kind of closer to that world than I am. I definitely think so. They haven't gone under yet. There's definitely layoffs happening. There's things that they're pivoting very quickly and heavily. I think, unfortunately, so it's not unusual for large companies to have to pivot and have to do layoffs to be able to help with their bottom lines, or it might be, because like we said, if you're running your own brand, you can rely on yourself to perform a multitude of tasks and do them very well. Oftentimes what brand owners or even business owners or whoever, is kind of like at the head of everything, what you find is as you go to replace yourself, you recognize that you're a unicorn and you won't be able to find someone to fill all of your roles. So at the end of it, you typically ended up, you find a singular person who can fulfill a singular role and then do that well. And then you kind of outsource yourself and you move on to the next thing. So as they acquired brands and as they grew so massively quickly, they had to be able to run those brands and they had to be able to grow those brands. And that just takes a lot of human capital. So it was necessary to bring on very large teams. And I'm sure those teams function very well. But as other costs rise, very often they might have maybe not spread out as thin. Maybe certain people are more isolated in some roles. Like you might have been doing marketing for only a couple brands when maybe you could be managing more than that. Helping them leverage software for one person to be able to do, maybe a larger task. So as they grew and as they built out their SOPs, maybe it was easier for them to have one person manage more. And of course, that's just, it's economics, unfortunately. Right. So we've seen, like I said, that's not an uncommon pivot for a company. I think there's a lot of Amazon sellers or brands who came into, again, they're leveraging Amazon. So you may not come from the typical business world. The Thrasios, the aggregators are very much coming from that world. They very much understand how to run these large, conglomerations, let's be honest. And so a pivot like this, while very shocking in the Amazon world, to be honest, is not as shocking once you step out into the typical business corporate world. Right. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that it's affecting people, but sometimes it plays out like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely one of those things that I think it's fairly common in the regular business world. It's always sad to see, I don't know if you're familiar with Simonson, and he's got some really wonderful ideas about, the humans in your business and all of those things. But I do know that it's just sometimes necessary to, pivot. And sometimes that means changing what you've been doing when you've been adding people and skills and stuff to your team so that you can capitalize on the money that you've brought in. And, that sometimes means you have to turn around and do the opposite. And I think what's so shocking for most people about this is that it's been such a swift pace, right? The steady rise. And then so many more aggregators joining because, this is the hot new fidget spinner. Buying businesses. And then, and just seeing that be validated with, VCs giving so much funding, and then to have it kind of be like, okay, things are kind of evening out. That seems like some of these groups could raise money, but who can say if they can actually manage their brands? And then we could see now some of the wheat is being sifted from the chaff, and now we're seeing some of the result of the rapid growth and the effect of the economy. I think, just as you said, 2022 is a different era than 2020.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. I love your insight so much, Elizabeth. Is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we let them go today?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, going forward, things may seem very volatile, but it's still possible to navigate Amazon. It's still possible to succeed on Amazon. It's getting less and less possible if you're not treating it as a business, knowing your numbers, like knowing your profits and being very savvy. But for the people who are willing to get in, they're willing to just have that learning curve and willing to get, savvy with it. There's definitely still room for you on Amazon.
I love it. And I think we should all use the word savvy much more. I love that so much. Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Your insights are on point, and really appreciate your time today. How do people find you?
Yeah. So the best way just to pick my brain on Amazon, most active on LinkedIn. So if you want, go follow me there. And then if you're interested in working with us, the best place is the website. So that's Junglr, JUNGLR.com. Form at the bottom, get in touch with me. I'm still doing intakes. So you can talk with me and see if we can help. Beautiful. Co-founders doing intakes. I love that so much. All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all for watching. And we will see you next week on Amazon Aggregators versus Brands. Take care. Thanks.